All right, good morning. It's good morning for me. For those of you who might usually be in the West Wing, if you don't know, the reason why Kirk had to cancel today is because Jolene's dad fell and they went to help mom, and he's going to keep us updated. So if you haven't heard, that's what's going on. Got a text after midnight last night, so. Okay, we are in 1 Thessalonians, and we're looking at 1 Thessalonians from the perspective of being in community. And just as a quick review, especially when you look at the first 3 chapters of this book, keep these things in mind. Remember, I gave you a general outline of just kind of the movements of the book, which are helpful as we kind of go through them. Right now, we're focused on the fact that in the first 3 chapters, Paul is celebrating this community and for what they have accomplished, considering the fact that they're a very new church and they have felt a lot of external pressure. Their presence has caused a lot of disruption. But yet they are standing firm, they're holding fast, what they're doing is working, but they are feeling it, okay? They are struggling, and this is Paul's first, remember, you go back to Acts chapter 17, this is where Paul, I believe it's 17, where Paul had visited Thessalonica, and this is where the church was established, and then the whole disruption within the community, and Paul leaves and goes to Berea. Those Jews in the community follow Paul to Berea and try to start the same communal disruption. And eventually Paul gets word back from Timothy about how this church community is doing. And Paul is ecstatic, he's excited, and this letter is his first communication, touching base with them once again. And he starts by, he's just simply celebrating who they are, what they've done, and really for a new community, he's helping to establish some things for them, helping them reorient their identity and who they are in light of their circumstances and what they're going through, okay? And so just as a quick reminder, the first chapter, first 5 verses is Paul's prayer for Thanksgiving. That's what opens up this first section. And then he goes from chapter 1, verses 6 through 10. He retells their story of their conversion, what they left behind, the changes that were made, how they reoriented themselves, and how their lives were permeated with these institutions and practices honoring Greek and Roman gods. And this changing of allegiance came at a cost for them. And but their overwhelming love for Jesus and anticipation of his return for them kind of made it all worth it. Okay, and Paul points this out. Chapter 2, he talks about his mission, his relationship he developed with them. There's very intimate language here. Paul presents himself as a different kind of leader. He uses terms, familial terms that remind them of being a part of a family. Okay. And this is extremely important, especially when one is reorienting their identity, because identity in the first century was wrapped up in what? Family. That's where you were born and you were given your identity based on your birth, where you're from, all sorts of things that we've talked about, okay? Paul even talks about what they have in common, their common persecution, but how in some way it's a way of them sharing together in the sufferings of Jesus. Paul talks about how he anguished over what they were going through, right? I mean, he is empathetic towards them, and but now he is ecstatic, and he was just thrilled to hear how well they were doing in the midst of hardships. And then he prays. The end of chapter 3, there's a prayer where he is praying that their love will grow, that their patience and their perseverance will be steadfast, their capacity to love, that their commitment to community and to Jesus will strengthen. It's just an amazing, I love it. I absolutely love it. especially in light of what they're going through. This is what they needed to hear, okay? And so I say Paul is celebrating them because he has reasons to celebrate, okay? And again, just as a quick reminder, see, we take it so for granted when it says, when in our culture where we establish church communities, right? We have a process. Doesn't matter which flavor, denomination, whatever it is, there is a process. We pretty much know what it's like to plant churches, right? In the first century, wasn't like this, okay? Planting a church, if you will, was a disruption. And it could have been a disruption in a lot of places. Some places, not so much, okay? But this place in Thessalonica, it definitely was a disruption. And this disruption was caused by some Jewish leaders in that community, okay? But to establish a social organization, I use that term very loosely, was a big deal, okay? And especially if that community did not look the same or not function the same as all the other institutions and associations within that community did, okay? And it was very obvious that their allegiance had changed. They were not running alongside the rest of the community and doing the things that the community was so accustomed to doing, and that brought attention. Did it not? It did, okay? But now, what was interesting about this community is that the disruption was started by whom? Jewish leaders in Thessalonica got envious, is the word, envious. More than just jealous, right? It was, I don't like the fact that you're being successful, and I'm going to do some things to cut you down. We're going to turn it down a notch, okay? And so they're being very aggressive, trying to take them before the courts, utilizing, the coattails of the system to try to stamp out this thing, a system that they didn't necessarily agree with, but they would utilize it to their advantage, right? Okay, so there's some ulterior motives going on here. But what that did was it brought to the community organizations, the community politicians, the leaders, brought to their attention the reality of this new group and how this new group was different, okay? And Thessalonica was a free city. They did what that meant was that they were going to do everything they could to not stir up problems with Rome, okay? And this was a potential problem because they were saying, what was the accusation? That the Jews leveled against these church leaders. Yeah, they were defying Caesar by declaring there's another king, King Jesus. That was political treason. Okay, that carried some heavy consequences, okay? So just kind of remember that there's the background, but Paul's celebrating them because of their new identity, okay? And in doing so, while Paul is doing this, he's also teaching them how to see themselves, okay? He's teaching them how to see themselves and reminding them of who they already are. That's really what you're going to see in these first three chapters, especially chapter 1, okay? And that's important because groups, no different from today, back then, groups were formed oftentimes tightly and deeply because of shared experiences. They were all going through this together. The example we use is, anybody been on track before? Right? You ever been in a mission field before? Just did something hard, served alongside other people where it wasn't easy, right? Been on retreats with people you don't know and you walk away having some deep connections. There's a reason for that. Okay, there's a reason for that. They have these shared experiences. They're going through the same things. And at the end of the day, who do they have? Who do they have to lean on? Jesus and each other. Okay? Jesus and each other. And so these groups being formed by shared experiences, and Paul publicly affirming them, their strengths, like what's going on, allows them to see, like, yeah, that's who we are. Like, wow, we went through. Have you ever gone through something and it took, after going through it, someone else to point out to you how hard that was or how big of a deal that was? Anybody? Right? Sometimes while you're in it, you're just doing it. You're just going through it. Sometimes you're just grinding it out. Right? And it's only when you look back sometimes that you realize, wow, I did that. Oh, that happened. That was a thing, right? That wasn't easy. That was hard. That was traumatic, or whatever it is, okay? Paul is putting that before them so they can see that, okay? So it's very helpful. They needed this. It would strengthen their loyalty, their resilience, their group identity. Like, hey, we're doing this together, okay? This is a good thing, okay? And they needed to hear these things. Did they not? Why? When you first establish relationships, are those relationships automatically, most of the time, are they automatically rock solid? No, they're fragile. They can be fragile, right? Yeah, and you need encouragement. And one of the reasons why they need encouragement is because there was pressure coming from outside, right? And they were holding well together. But even though that you're holding well together and there's pressures from the outside, you feel those pressures, it can cause some internal anxieties on the inside, right? And so even though you can withstand the pressures from the outside, right, you still may implode from the inside, okay? So they needed these things as a group. And so as you read through this, you've got to ask yourselves, what might they be hearing when Paul writes these? When this letter is being read, like what might they be hearing, right? We covered this a little bit last week. And I would just summarize by saying, yeah, you belong, you matter, and what you're doing is working. Keep going, right? Keep going. You're not alone, okay? And so let's look at this. Reasons to celebrate. And what you're going to see in this first chapter is really how the gospel forms new communities. Okay, we're talking about a formation of a new community here. Okay, this boots on the ground. We get a window into what it was like in the first century. And a lot of this stuff, while the circumstances might be different, the same experiences or the same core values that are there then are present here today. Okay, and are needed here today. All right, so look at this. Verse 1. Somebody read verse 1 for us. First Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 1.
To the Thessalonians and God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, grace to you and peace.
Keep going to verse 4, if you will.
We give thanks to God always for all of you, constantly mentioning you in our prayers, remembering before our God and Father your work of faith and labor of love and steadfastness and hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. For we know, brothers loved by God, that He has chosen you.
Remember, look at verse 1. What's the word he uses there? To the what? Church. We could glide over that very easily, but don't. Okay? Ecclesia, what does that word mean? Especially in the Greco-Roman world. What did that word mean? Assembly. Okay? It was, in especially urban context, okay, word that often referred to literal civic bodies and associations that were evident as they came together, okay? So it's like official bodies of people, or organizations, associations, institutions, however you want to talk about it, okay? I believe Paul uses this word, right, specifically here to these people. He wants them, okay, this group of Christians, to see themselves as what? An official group, legitimate, the real deal, okay? I think Paul is very intentional with the words that he uses here. Like their presence, they need to see themselves and their presence as a real social entity. Now, when we say social, what do we mean by social? What do we mean when we say social in our culture? What are we talking about? What do you think about? What comes to your mind? Group of people, okay. Friends. What else? Interactions. Whether tight or loose, right? It's kind of a generic term, right? Just means that you're interacting with people out in public, right? Here's the deal. Common interest, okay? In the first century, the way that this word social is used, especially in the Greco-Roman world, social was more than just casual relationships. We're talking about a web of obligations. We're talking about status. We're talking about public belonging that structured everyday life. There was no private life. Okay? There's no private life, not like we think about it. Okay? We're talking about all the associations and institutions and your status and your place in life and the role you played in this community, the larger community of Thessalonica. Okay? The expectations that people held you to that were beyond your family and your group. Okay? This is a web of belonging. Okay? When you think about that, what do you think about? Family? What else? So it starts with household. Then what else? Where does it go? Community. What's in the community? Yep. Guilds that you might be a part of. If you had a patron, right, there's that relationship that you had to maintain, responsibilities, obligations to that. What else might there be? Okay. What else? Okay. So like neighbors, community, you know that if a neighbor reached out for help and you weren't willing to help them, that would be a black mark on you, and people would say, you can't trust this person. It would happen like that. Okay. Everybody depended upon one another to uphold what the DNA, the fabric of what they believed held society together, and indeed it did with their society. Okay, everybody played a role. Okay, and anything that went that was in opposition to what was normal, what was accepted, was expected, was seen as subversive and a rupture, and you were trying to tear the whole thing down, and you would be seen or be looked upon with shame. Okay. And so, when we talk about social here, we're talking about, obligations and status, and like it's so much more than just, we're going to have a social gathering, we're going to get together, and we're going to, talk and, eat and, have fun, or whatever it was. Okay? This is so much more than just that. We're talking about things that control, that dictated a person's everyday life. Okay? So, in a pluralistic society, depended upon a patronage system, the nature, okay, of this community and how it would function would create some social pressures. So they're feeling it. Okay, Paul? Exactly. And that was a part of the web, right, of obligation. Okay? So, Paul is trying to help them see how they are legitimate, official. This is not just a Saturday night fling type thing. This isn't just a fly by the seat of your pants moment where we kind of got wrapped up in it. No. This is a legitimate thing that's being established here, okay? And see yourself that way. So then he talks about the differences here, okay? So the thing that he's celebrating is called what we would refer to as status. Okay, now status meant a whole lot more than what we see. You were born with a certain status. Okay? You guys are familiar with caste systems? Okay? Collective cultures? That's this. Okay? You're born with that. Okay? Paul utilizes the things that they're familiar with and that they understand that their identities are wrapped up in to help them understand how you have a new identity now. And here's where you find it. And so notice the language that he also uses. We talked a little bit about this last week. Verse 3, he says, God the Father. God the Father, okay? Our God and Father, brothers and sisters. You go to chapter 2, he uses all these family metaphors. It sounds like he's saying, when we showed up, you guys took us in and treated us like we were children, like you just cared for us. And then he says, and we treated you and cared for you like a mother, like a father does to their children, okay? What's he doing with that language? Sense of belonging. Because remember, where was your identity wrapped up in? Family, okay? Household, right? How do you change your identity? The idea of reorienting your identity was not a normal, common thing. The closest thing they came to was adoption. which is what changed your name, your future, your inheritance, your family, that whole thing. Your identity is wrapped up in your family, right? You have a new father. Now, how weird or how do you think they might have struggled with seeing God, and I use this term loosely, a God or God as a father? You think that would have been easy? Yeah. What were they used to with? What were they used to? Yeah. 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 They were more used by the gods, right? For their own benefit. And so, language like this, right? He's saying, listen, you all have the same Father. God, our Father. You all have the same Father, which means you all have the same what? Inheritance, same future hope, same family, right? And your status comes from where? God and not Caesar or Rome or whatever else, right? Exactly. Would that have caused some problems? Yeah, because who you see as family dictated what? Everything. Obligation, responsibility, priorities, like everything, okay? And that would have changed. Family would have noticed, wow, things are different here. Community would have noticed, wow, you're not participating here. Okay, Paul? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That is why Jesus said, listen, by following me, your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, they may have a problem with that, right? If you're not willing to love me more, right? Why would that have been a problem? Because their identity was so tied up in honoring, all right, their family, their household, their identity, and reorienting that was not an easy thing, okay? Talk about a gut check. Counting the cost, if you will, okay? Like, in a very, very real way. Had implications for their entire life. In fact, I believe that the first century was filled with people who had no other family other than that family. Okay? All right, so Paul is saying, listen, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, right. And that was going to be put to the test, right? Be put to the test. So Paul is saying, listen, your status comes from God. He's your father. Yeah, you have a new identity, new family. God says you are his beloved. Okay? So my question is, why did they need to hear this? Okay. Yeah. You might be feeling the sense of shame, guilt, even, right? Because of what you're leaving behind with family, and all that stuff is deeply rooted. Paul?
We don't start churches in the middle of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. We would say, oh, it's not going to work there. Oh, this isn't the right time, right? Anybody else? Why do they need to hear this? You are God's beloved. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. The very root of their existence and what they have experienced. Okay, they experienced the Lord in some ways that, man, kept them together. Like they couldn't deny it, right? This isn't hypothetical information that they can acquiesce to. This isn't like, oh, I could go along with that. They had some real life experiences, okay, with the Lord. And they couldn't deny that, but that also didn't eliminate the external pressures and the internal, right? And so there's lots of tension there. Who knows the questions they were asking themselves, the doubts, the fears, all the things. We understand what that's like, right? When you get stressed, does everything seem very clear? Some people, yes. There's some people who thrive under that, and they can handle that, right? But for most of us, what's it like when you feel overwhelmed? Is everything clear? Is there clarity? Oh, right? Questions and doubt, all sorts of things start stirring up, right? Internal tension is there. But the very root of why they even experienced what they did and why they even existed as a group, as a community, as a church, was what? What was at the root of that? Love. God's love. And they need to know that that was the seed that was planted, right? And that's what's growing in you. So, why do we need to hear this? Yeah, don't we? Why might we need to hear this?
Ours is different a little bit. Theirs is more political.
Okay.
Ours is more social pressures or activity that draw us away from the right thing.
Okay.
But still full of pressure, still a challenge. Status quo society versus
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Our cultural reality is that we just made a choice. I came here today, I go someplace else next Sunday, maybe for 3 or 4 Sundays, or 2 months, or a year. I just don't do anything because I don't feel like it.
Mm.
Our culture has blinded this society to the fact, to the reality. We are created in the image of God. Have that need that came through the resurrected Christ. That has to break through.
Mm.
That has to melt us and convict us and recreate our community, not from the image of ourselves.
It's good. Okay. Anybody else? Abby?
I think it's a lot more broken on this idea of family in our culture.
Okay.
And so we need to understand how God created the family.
Mm.
Church can mirror that for us.
Okay. It's good. Anybody else? They're all hitting on this, and we're no different than them. The way that I talk about it is everyone has a spiritual formation. You realize that? Everybody. Whether you believe in God or not. Hitler had a spiritual formation. You realize that? Just as much as Paul did. just as much as these people did. Your spiritual formation, well, that's what's formed and shaped you up to the point of where you are in the present moment, okay? And as a result of that spiritual formation, the things you're told, you're taught, you experience, your upbringing, right? The values that are inherent maybe in your family. Maybe think about all this, and especially in light of this culture, and the collectivist type culture. Those things run deep, don't they? How you see yourself,